Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today is Monday, and as usual, I am here to do the Prep Talk live show where I talk about life, I talk about business, running a food-based business in Los Angeles, and what that kind of just looks like. And so today is going to kind of be a special episode because it has been officially just over a year since I and my family closed our restaurant, our baby of 12 years. And it's kind of marking that 1 year anniversary. And so I looked over to my husband, Charlie, this past weekend, and I just kind of said, I think I'm finally ready to talk about it. I've mentioned it here and there on, this channel and in videos and stuff like that, but I never really got into the nitty-gritty of it. Just because, for one, it wasn't just my story to tell, right? As I mentioned, it's a family business. And so there is a lot of people affected by these decisions. And it wasn't just me making these lofty decisions for our business and for our family, but also because I almost couldn't confront it. Like I said, we were in business for 12 years. And so it was something very difficult for me to just kind of confront. And it was very difficult for me to accept that it was something that we had to do or that we were going to do. And I, in a lot of ways, blamed myself for having to make that tough decision. But, now that it's in hindsight, it's been over a year since we officially closed our restaurant. I've had the opportunity to actually have clear perspective on everything that happened. And I'll talk about it later in the video, but just how, it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, and it's all a matter of perspective, not circumstance. If you look at what happened to us and our family and many other businesses during these last 2 years, it's all a matter of perspective. You can look at it like it's a tragedy and you can be angry and upset and bitter about it, or you can see it as a blessing and a new beginning. So I think that's why I'm officially ready to talk about it. As I mentioned, I just kind of touched on it, maybe mentioned it here and there in, a few videos or, things like that. But I've never really gotten into the nitty gritty of what the breaking point was, what had happened, what was leading up to 2020 and all that. So I know it's a weird thing, but I'm going to be mentioning, talking about the pandemic. I'm going to be talking about COVID and our family and how we were affected and all that stuff. So I know YouTube doesn't necessarily like that, but this is my story and that's real and that's what we're going to do. So a year ago, let's start there, right? Let's start at the point where we closed, and then let me kind of work backwards, because I think that's how it's making sense in my head, and I feel like it's an easier way to tell the story. So on November 1st, we closed our restaurant after 12 years. That part you guys know. That is the easy part to kind of talk about because it was reality. There was a lot going on during 2020, not just for our business, but for our family life as well. And the main thing that kind of tipped it over for us was just the fact that we stuck it out for quite some time. Here in Los Angeles, businesses and, our stay-at-home orders began the middle of March. And let's see, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. For 8 months, we stuck it out in hopes that, sooner or later, things would get back to normal, whatever that meant. And month after month, it just did not get any easier. And if anything, it got more complicated, more scary. And as as being considered a frontline worker, being in the food business, owning a restaurant, it was extremely scary. Not knowing what was going to go on, how long this was going to keep going, when people would finally start to feel safe, when we would start to finally feel safe. So in November, actually the, end of October, we just kind of said, that's it. We're not willing to put our health, our family, our lives at risk. And so we've just got to cut our losses and let it go. And it was, I'm shaking right now because I'm reliving that moment when we finally decided. It was just one of the hardest things that I have ever had to do. It's got to be in my top 3 of the hardest things that I've had to do so far. And it was because not only was my future at stake here, but my husband's, my godparents, my son, and everyone involved. And so it was a really lofty decision. And then I was so worried about our employees and their safety and how it was all working out. So that was kind of what led to the decision. But let's scoot back. Let's move our story back a little farther into let's start with 2019. So in 2019, I got pregnant with our son, Micah. And this was in July. After 5 years of wanting to start a family, Charlie and I were blessed with our first pregnancy. And we were so excited. It was just, I'm so grateful that it happened when it did, because being a first-time parent, to be so ready to be a parent and get to be able to expand your family finally after such a long time was so exciting. But that also came with knowing that, especially if you're an entrepreneur, changes have to be made. I was extremely dedicated to work. I focused on work. I talked about nothing but entrepreneurship, business, work, you name it. That was just where my brain was. And I knew that I had to make changes. So leading up to 2020, I was beginning to train our staff for my maternity leave, especially toward the end of 2019. I had, promoted some of our employees to shift supervisors, to management, so that for the first 5 months of 2020, I would be ready to kind of start to let go of the reins a little bit and start to transition my life so that I can balance motherhood and entrepreneurship better. Micah was expected in March. So March 4th was his due date, and he was actually born on February 20th, 2020. So he came a little bit early, and it was just, it was so funny because I had gone on maternity leave February 15th, and I thought I had, about 3 weeks to prepare. And then 6 weeks later, my water broke, here he comes. So I had no time to really take a true maternity leave before he was born. But needless to say, because of, plans out of my control, I had a long maternity leave. And so he was born, like I said, February of 2020. And then the stay-at-home order here in Los Angeles County started on March 14th, March 15th, middle of March. So he was 3 weeks old about when the stay-at-home order began. And we were just thinking, that's okay. Because when you have a newborn, you want to kind of wait a little bit because their immune systems are so new, so weak, and you want to give their bodies a time to adjust. You want to give yourself time to adjust during that time. And so when the first stay-at-home order began, I just thought, okay, no big deal. He's not even 3 months old yet. And so probably in the next month, it'll all be fine. We'll be good. And then a month turned into 2 months. And then I was supposed to return back to the restaurant the weekend before Mother's Day, the week before Mother's Day in 2020. And that didn't happen. So my return to work didn't happen. My husband, Charlie, his return to work didn't happen. And so I had to rely on my team and my family that was still working at our restaurant to kind of hold down the fort. And they did an amazing job. But I have to tell you how hard it was for them, because suddenly it went from a busy Saturday to not a soul walking into the restaurant pretty much overnight. If not overnight, within a few days, because of the stay-at-home order. And they were going in my place day after day, risking their health, their safety for me, for my family. And that really weighed on me heavily. It was very difficult for me to swallow, but I knew that, especially with a newborn, there was just no way. I could not take him to the restaurant, which was originally the plan. The plan was when I would return to work, and when Charlie would return to work, he'd basically just be with us. We'd carry him around. I could nurse him in the office. He can take his naps in there, and then we would have him by the register. Like, that was just the plan. And we were thinking that we were going to figure it out, but obviously that changed, and that wasn't going to make sense for us anymore. And so, we were trying to figure out, well, if there's going to be a stay-at-home order, what are we going to do? Because when customers stopped walking in the door, I think there was a day where we sold $28. $28 in a day. And we're open at the time from 10 to 5. $28. That's not even 2 hours of labor. It was just so scary. So not being present at the restaurant and being an absentee owner for the time being, what were we going to even do? What was going to happen? It just wasn't logical to stay open. And so we were thinking, how is this going to be sustainable? How are we going to be able to pay our bills, which we were not paying after a while, because we just couldn't. How could we pay bills with $28 coming in for the entire day? There's just no way. So we had to think on our feet. We had to pivot. And so what we did personally was we decided we needed to push our online store. So we had an online store already, luckily, and we were selling pastry in that online store nationwide. So that was already in place, but it definitely was not a big part of our business. It was just a little extra income here and there, and almost like we considered it almost like marketing, because it cost us more to have an online store than it cost to, like it just was more of an expense than it was income, if that makes sense. So it was just there. And then I knew, since I was personally shopping online most of the time, because I wanted to stay home as much as possible, I knew that a lot of other families and other people were doing that too. So I said, well, let's ramp up the online store. Let's remind people that the online store is there. Let's stock the store fully and just see what happens. So that was step number 1. And then it kind of gained some traction. And then I remembered we had a project that we had been working on probably since the beginning of 2019 or the end of 2018. And the plan was to try to make an ube pancake mix, so that into a cook at home form, so that people could enjoy it at home and not just at our restaurant. And so we were trying to figure out how to formulate that recipe so that it could be similar to the pancake mixes that you see at any grocery store, any buttermilk pancake mix where you could just kind of add water and you can make pancakes at home. We wanted to do that, but for the ube pancake market. And so it was already a project that we had wanted to do, but because of just the daily operation of running a restaurant, we got the recipe and then it just kind of stayed there. Like, we never actually started bagging it or doing anything with it. And then finally, the pandemic gave us that opportunity to do so, because like I said, $28 in a day, it just was not feasible. So we decided to, with what little money we had left, I'm pretty sure it was just on a credit card, we bought some bags, we printed some labels at the restaurant, and we started packaging our pancake mix and put it onto our online store. And we crossed our fingers and just said, hopefully someone will buy it. Who knows? Let's see. So I think we made 10 to start, and then we put it onto our online store. We shared it on Instagram and it sold. And we were just thinking, whoa, it sold within a day. 10 bags at $16 a bag. That's $160. We made $160 in our online store that cost less to operate compared to our huge restaurant that was 36, almost 3,400 square feet, and we had sold $28. We knew we had to shift focus, right? So we just said, all right, let's go all in on our online store and just start making product for the store. And if people walk in, wonderful. If they don't, then let's just keep making product for the online store. And soon people started to gain word of it, that our pancake mix was online. People were telling people, and it just started becoming so busy with online orders. It was amazing. It was just such a blessing. So when we did that, people would usually buy pancake mix, they would buy an ube cookie butter, they would buy some pastries here and there, and we just kind of said, okay, let's just embrace this, because who knows how long this is going to last for. At this point, we were very we're very willing to just say anything could happen at the drop of a hat. This could all go away. So let's just do what we can and do our best, right? So we did that for a while, but it still wasn't enough. We used to have $5,000 days, and $160 compared to $28 was still really great. But, it just definitely wasn't enough. And we just had to make the decision. That was when we launched it. I believe our pancake mix was launched in May, and then June came and we were like, okay, maybe this is going to be over, soon. It's already been a few months. So let's see if it all goes back to normal soon. And then it didn't. And then we waited another month and another month and another month. And if anything, like I said, it was just getting more and more scary. And so we had a moment where I had to really look at the well-being of our family and our staff. And a lot of our staff didn't want to work because they were afraid, understandably so. And mind you, a lot of our staff were students, so they were already staying home and not going to class in person at the time. And they wanted to stay home as well. I mean, I did. How can I blame them for wanting to stay home? I can't, And so a lot of our staff didn't want to work, and we were working with whoever wanted to at the time, which was very few. And it was just that. And then on top of that, my family was working there in place of me, and they were high risk, which was the scariest part of the entire situation. My dad was working there, and he's well in his 60s. My aunts were there, and they're high risk. I just couldn't, my conscience just couldn't sit with that with any peace at all, because I would be terrified when we would turn the sign open, or my dad would leave for work, and I wouldn't know whether they would come back sick or okay. I wouldn't know if someone was walking through the door that could put my family in danger or not. And the stress just overcame the hope of trying to stay open. So finally, in October, I had to have a sit down with our family, basically on the phone, which is not the way we want to do this, right? But because of the situation, we had to. And we had a conversation, and we just said, okay, this is what's on the table. We don't know what's going to happen. Our expenses are piling up. And what are we going to do? So let's talk about our financial situation at the time. So at the time, to basically keep the restaurant running, we needed to have about $50,000 to $60,000 in sales per month. And I want to say at our best month during the pandemic, we had probably hit $7,000. So we were nowhere near where we needed to be able to pay for our bills. So as you can imagine, our bills were piling up in the hundreds of thousands at this point. And I just couldn't figure out what to do. We applied for PPP. We got it. We got $30,000. That isn't even enough to last 1 month. It wouldn't keep our business afloat for more than a month. And then there was a round 2, but by then months had passed and the expenses just kept piling up. There was just no way. We had applied for an EIDL loan, which is for economic injury and disaster, and we had gotten approved for that, but it still wasn't enough because, and this is why I bring it up, because there was just so much happening even before the pandemic that restaurant owners don't want to talk about. And it finally came to a screeching halt in October when we just said, we have nothing left. All we had was our restaurant. 2 families, all we had was our restaurant. There is nothing left to give, and there is nothing even left to take. It was just all gone. And as we were running out, we just said, even if we wanted to keep going, for how long is this going to be with the hope, with just a glimmer of hope that it would continue? How many more hundreds of thousands of dollars is going to be stacking up in the back of our minds, knowing that we have to pay these bills with just a hope that things will get back to normal? And when they do, when things get back to normal, which we all knew was not going to be the old normal. We knew that it was going to be some weird form of normal, right? When that moment would happen, then what? Everyone's going to come for us to pay. And hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even more than that, when the time comes, there's no way we would be able to pay it. And so we just kind of said, okay, well, in that case, the only logical thing to do at this point is to close. That way we can stop the accrual of the expenses and we could just figure out everything that's past due and then go from there and see what we can do. And so that's what we did, and we officially closed on the 1st. So before I talk about pre-COVID and pre-pandemic, I want to talk about our last day of service, because we had known that we were going to close the restaurant at some point. We just didn't know when. And we were waiting and waiting because we were just hoping that things might change. And so we just, let those 8 months go. But truthfully, I think we had known by the 6-month mark that, 6 months of unpaid expenses, you guys can do the math, was just too much. And we just couldn't wrap our heads around how we were going to pay that all back. So that was that. And then we finally made the decision. We let our employees know first, and then we let the customers know basically right after. And so we gave our customers 3 or 4 days notice that we were going to be closing. And so our last day of service was actually Sunday, November 1st, 2020. And so I decided that I wanted to come in. My husband, Charlie, also came in, and Micah came, and we did our last 4-hour shift in the restaurant of service. And we didn't know what to expect. We weren't sure what was going to happen or if anyone would even show up, because like I said, there were days where we made $28. There was days where we made a couple $100. No more than a couple $100 the entire pandemic. And, like I said, in the past, we used to make, at least in a day, we would do about, $5,000. So, wasn't sure what to expect. I just knew I wanted to show up for our last day of service. And when I did, there were people falling in line for just one more chance to see us, to talk to us, to tell us about their experience at our restaurant. And I was completely moved. Every time I talk about it, I can't help but choke up a little bit, because that was when I realized, when you just give and give and give, if you actually give with a heart of, just gratitude, thanksgiving, with no expectation, you start to build relationships with your customer base. And that last day of service, I saw it, because there are so many people that I hadn't seen walk through the door in years. And not because they hated us or didn't like us anymore, but life gets in the way, right? And they had walked in and just told us how sad they were that we were closing. Or they wanted to eat our pancakes one more time. Or they wanted to buy pastry from us, whatever we had. it was the first time since the pandemic began that we had seen a line at all in our restaurant. It would be like, it was almost going out the door, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, social distance, of course, but like, I just couldn't believe it that the word had spread within 3 days that we were closing, and people wanted to come in. They wanted to buy. They wanted to talk to us. They wanted to take a picture in front of our wall. We have this ube wall that's painted purple and says "I love ube" on it, and it was, one of the most popular things for people to do would be take pictures in front of the wall. And it was just so crazy to see people want to come in and take a picture in front of the wall one last time with their family. They would want to, like I said, just come in and order. And to hear the stories, every single person that walked in and wanted to share, to hear the stories of, their kids starting to come to the restaurant when they were 4, 5, 6 years old, and now being in high school or graduated from college and driving and living their own lives. Oh my gosh. I just was so grateful for that day, and I'm so glad that we decided to go, because it was kind of like our last hurrah, right? It was just our last chance to be with our team, to do service for one last time, and not in the way we envisioned it at all by any means. But it gave me that glimmer of hope that even though we were closing a chapter of a physical location, it didn't necessarily mean that entrepreneurship for us is over, and it was just that moment that I needed to, it was just the moment that I needed to remember hope. All hope is not lost in a time where things were just really, really scary. Not only were you afraid for your health, but then now you're afraid of how you're even going to raise a family or take care of your loved ones. How do you do it? How do you do it in a time like this? And so out of that day, it was just, sorry guys, out of that day, it gave me the idea that we can't stop. We're still reaching people. It was just that moment where we were like, this is too great. Like our customers, I love them so much. Like, I can't just say goodbye and never be around them again. So we had to figure it out. We figured out how we were going to make it work. And we just knew, okay, then we need to start baking from home. Just go back to the old school way. Forget about the industrial equipment, forget about volume, forget about overhead and like having an official place. Let's just start from scratch again and start baking from home. And then we can just figure it out. We'll just do it step by step and just kind of go from there. Actually, there's people tuning in. Let me say hi. Hi, Jesse. Thank you so much for joining in. Hi, James and Mark. Hearing the stories from our customers was, I think, the best part of having that one last day. It was just so moving. I had, I think a lot of people don't really get to say what they need to say to people that they love, or even establishments that just were a big part of someone's life. I know I experienced that when I was seeing my favorite restaurants close down, because especially when they're small businesses, I got to know the owners. And I think that was the thing that was so heartbreaking for me, because I never got a chance to really tell them how much I enjoyed their food and how much it like meant to me. There are so many moments in my lifetime where food was associated with a happy moment, a birthday, an anniversary, whatever it is. And so, just to hear it from the customers just made it full circle and just made it so much better. Hi, Heather. I'm glad you got to tune in. Let's see. Anyway, so moving on. I finally stopped crying, but I just wanted to talk about the hope after, right? And so that's kind of why I'm here talking about it, because it was a scary time, but we got to turn it around in a different way. We got to do things differently and think outside the box and figure out how we could continue to still share what we wanted to share and accomplish our mission statement of sharing Filipino food with people, but just in a different way and completely reimagined. And it was kind of, it was scary to even embark on that, because it's a whole different ball game, right? When you're talking about going from a restaurant, that if you've been doing that for a long time, you kind of know the ins and outs of how to operate and what to do. And then after that, once you kind of pivot and you figure out how to make it the same but in a different way, it was a transition, at like the least to say. It was definitely a transition of just, how do we do this without our commercial space? What kind of permit do we need? Who do we need to contact? What do we need to do? And so we navigated through that at the beginning, after we closed, so that we could still continue to keep going. And then, like I said, we just started baking from home. We started with that because we had no idea how busy it was really going to be. And in the middle of that, while we were still trying to keep the online store going, we were trying to also, in the background, look for commercial space. We were trying to figure out, the whole rise of ghost kitchens was happening even before the pandemic was a thing. Ghost kitchens started to pop up a lot of places because of the popularity of Postmates and Uber Eats and DoorDash and all those delivery services. Ghost kitchens started to really pick up steam. And so I definitely was trying to balance it all. And it was new. It was hard. It was a lot of work that I wasn't expecting, because in my mind, I was just thinking, during my maternity leave, the staff is going to take care of it. And then a few months later, I would go back to work and then we'd just be back to normal. But, I had to wrap my head around parenting, or, taking care of my child, and now navigating a completely, basically new business. And so it was just, it was a lot to wrap our head around, but we made it work. We came together as a family, we figured it out, and it was just, it was just something that we had to do because we weren't going to just give up just yet. I mean, we could have cut our losses there, but that's okay. We decided that with the impact that we felt and the kindness that we were shown from our customers, we wanted to keep going. So that's what we decided to do. And I'm so glad we did, because then from there, we were able to start selling our our mixes and bottled products with online grocery stores. And just recently we were able to put our mix into a Asian grocery store that is a nationwide company. And so it's been such a change in what I thought life was going to look like. This is not the trajectory that I was expecting at all to even, think about. And so this is a whole new business for me. It's a whole new arena. It's definitely not the wholesale on the food business side is definitely not the same as running a restaurant. And I don't know, I guess I just being inexperienced I'm not a chef or anything like that, but navigating through this, I thought naively that like the food business is the food business. And yes, there are things that kind of overlap here and there, but each industry, even within the food business, is completely different. It's just not, it's not what I thought it was going to be. And that's great because I am always up for the challenge of learning something new and always wanting to try and make myself better and grow within my industry. And so I have had that opportunity by pivoting our business to do that. And I'm really, really really grateful that I have had the opportunity to learn, because it's more fun than just being like, yeah, I've been doing this 12 years already. And I admittedly was getting a little bit bored, but it was still fulfilling. And it was one of the best things that I ever did, even though I did get bored here and there. But this gave me that excitement that I was looking for within my business to be able to continue in this way. Now, the whole reason the whole reason why I got inspired to even talk about what happened during that time was because this past weekend, Charlie and I started watching a docuseries on Hulu by Dave Chang called, what is it called? The Next Thing You Eat. And we haven't gotten through the entire thing, but it really inspired me to kind of talk and share about our personal story, because there is an episode in the show that really resonated with me and really hit home, and it inspired me to want to talk about this subject more because, for one, and I'm only speaking here in the United States, because I've never owned a business or a food business, outside of the United States. But a good point that was brought up in the docuseries was the fact that at one point in certain areas, including our area, businesses basically had to shut down for, I think, a week or 2 weeks. In the docuseries, they had mentioned it was 2 weeks. And I think that was in San Francisco. So there was a period where we had to shut down. And a good point that someone had made was the idea that the sustainability basically of the restaurant industry and how volatile it really is, considering that a 2-week shutdown could devastate all of us in this way. And that's something that I think a lot of, restaurant owners that are, especially, small businesses, mom and pop shops, could never really openly and comfortably talk about because of just, the way the industry has been or is. And I'm really glad that it was brought up in the series, because it gives not just us restaurant owners that are small businesses some space to start the discussion, but also consumers and our customers be able to see that side of the restaurant industry. And that's why I wanted to actually talk about this, because even prior to the pandemic, our business was not successful on paper by any means. It was very difficult at the time, even prior to the pandemic, to run our restaurant. We had moved to a almost 3,700 square foot space in 2018, going from about a 2,000 square foot space and a very small dining area. We had moved in 2018 because we were growing, and it was really exciting. And it was this time in our business in 2018 where it was just, there was so much opportunity, and there was so much possibility within the within that time period, right? And, as a novice business owner that doesn't have a lot of, cash to just spend, obviously we went over our budget when we opened our new larger space. And because of that, we had to take out financing and funding and loans to be able to pay for the space. And then on top of that, it's always a hard thing to move a brick and mortar location, to move it completely. That's why a lot of people like to have different branches. Like they'll have multiple locations versus closing it down and then opening a new space, because of the fact that people are just so used to you being at that physical location. And mind you, we were there for almost 10 years at our original location. And then when we moved in 2018, we knew that there was going to be this time period where we had to inform our customers and the public that we had closed and then moved. And so we were prepared for that, but underprepared as always. And so it was part of the plan when the pandemic was out of the picture to ramp up our marketing and find different ways to utilize our huge space. And we were doing that. And in 2019, we started to really see the momentum start to build. We were doing private events, pretty much every single weekend, almost, in 2019. And we were booked for all of the first 5 months of 2020. I was getting inquiries for events well before the new year. And so we knew that we were on the right track. We were moving toward that idea of okay, we're finally kind of getting comfortable in our space. We know what we can kind of do, the different ways that we can create income in this space and how to utilize it properly and all of that. So we were starting to really gain the momentum that we needed to survive. However, like I said, 2020 happened, and it was just kind of like a screeching halt of that growth for us. But, I'm not the only case where this was happening, because there were other, colleagues of mine that were talking about how hard it was to just run a restaurant at that time in 2018 and 2019. It wasn't this, oh, everyone was doing amazingly well, and then the stay-at-home order hit in March of 2020, and it just completely stopped, just like a cliff. It wasn't. For some, for me, and for a lot of us, it was actually a downward slope to a cliff. We were still doing okay, but it wasn't like it was going, the trajectory was up and then it dropped. It was actually either stagnant or like a slow decline, and then it dropped. And to re-reference David Chang's docuseries of 2 weeks of a shutdown impacted me. And clearly, because they talked about it also, I wasn't the only one that it impacted in that way, where 2 weeks of a shutdown could just blow restaurants out of the water and close them down. And that's because there was something happening before the pandemic hit within the restaurant and food industry that was already that bubble was starting to already grow. The issues were already starting to grow. And it was just a matter of, when is that bubble going to burst? When is that going to happen? And I think whether the pandemic happened or didn't happen, it was going to be eventual. That at some point there was going to be a breaking point, because there's so much change happening so fast within the food industry. It was so crazy. It was hard to keep up. You have the new popularity of delivery service, and ghost kitchens, and all of these different things that were happening within technology that was being applied to the food industry, that a lot of things started to really change. And then you have all of these other factors of just, the day-to-day, and how you're going to navigate your marketing because of social media and all the different hats you're going to be wearing as a restaurant owner, trying to keep your small business afloat. There was just a lot happening even prior to 2020 that was just inevitable. And I think 2020 was that tipping point for a lot of those businesses where it was just, that was it. That was the last straw. It just broke the camel's back at that point. And so, I don't know what it was, because when I talk about this with other colleagues and restaurant owner friends, a lot of us were like, what is it? What is it? Why is it so hard? Why are things so difficult right now? I don't understand. And this was in 2018, 2019. And we couldn't put our finger on it. And even when I look back now, I can't put my finger on it either. But there was something happening. And maybe with time and observation, or even talking to someone a little more knowledgeable than me, I could gain more clarity on it. But I really couldn't, I don't know. I still don't know up till now what that reason was. But all in all, I know I'm one of the lucky ones that has been able to keep going. And I know that has to do with the longevity of our business, the brand that we had built over those 12 years in business. And we were very lucky to have that and be in business as long as we did, because we were able to build that community and that audience we needed, and pivot with it in a way that worked for our customers, in a way that made sense for them, and still be able to continue to do it. And so I know I'm one of the lucky ones, and I'm so grateful that we're able to continue just in a completely different way. And I don't know what the future holds for us. I mean, I think if there's anything that I've learned from the past year, 2 years, is that change can happen in an instant. It doesn't have to be this slow growth or this fast or this slow decline. It could just be, today I am here and tomorrow I'm not. That's how easy and quick things can change. And it's just a reminder to me that, I have so many other things aside from just my business that makes me happy, that gives me fulfillment, that makes me feel whole. And even if things changed within my business tomorrow, I could figure it out. I'm a hot mess. Clearly, you could see my office. I'm a hot mess, but this is me. And if things change and if things are different tomorrow, if that means I just have to pivot a little bit, no problem. If that means that I have to completely change my life, no problem. But there's a reason to all the madness, and if anything, it brought me an opportunity to be stronger and learn more about my industry and be better. And I think with every situation that I personally encounter where it's hard, I want to come out better and stronger and learn from it, because then a failure or a harsh critique or disappointment is all for nothing. And so I just really want to make sure that every time something like this happens, because yeah, a pandemic might be once in a lifetime, but ups and downs are forever, and businesses don't last a lifetime. Anything can change, like I said. And so to know that and to be reminded that in these last 2 years makes me remember that I can do anything, and I just have to play to my strengths. And if it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. So that is that for today. Thank you guys for just listening in. We're approaching that hour, so I want to make sure that I am respectful of your guys' time. But thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for joining me on this kind of storytelling journey of what happened to our restaurant and why we had to close it, and our decisions and what has happened after. But if you want to catch this live show again, if you want to know more about what happened, feel free to put them in the comments or send me a DM. I'm happy to talk about it. But yeah, have a great week, everyone. And next week we will be back to our normal, schedule with planning for the week and everything like that. But I just thought it was time. It was time to just let all of that go, so that really my soul feels just like I put it to rest and put it to bed. Thank you guys. Have a great one. Bye.